To drive a team of 4 horses is a wonderful experience. I love to do it. To me, it's all absorbing. It gives a wonderful feeling of power. In actual fact, we've hardly seen anyone retire from driving. They seem to want to drive 4 horses until they die.
Four-in-hand driving is one of the newest equestrian sports. Yet over 15 countries now compete at the World Championships. George Bowman, 8 times the national champion, is probably the best-known British competitor.
Well, I've always been brought up with horses, riding horses and all kinds of horses, but I only got involved into driving through an accident I had at work, which temporarily sort of paralysed me down one side. And because I thought I'd never ride again, I started driving, but I never dreamt I would be driving competitions at that time. Driving is the fastest growing equine sport. It's a family sport. And it pulls people together, it makes the people work as a team. I love it. I love every second of it. The social side is very nice. There are some very nice people involved.
I got into it in a very roundabout way. I happened to be president of the International Equestrian Federation, and it was suggested to me that we ought to have some international rules for carriage driving, because up until then, each country had its own rules, and it was quite active in Hungary and in Germany. They had a lot of competitions. And so I put a committee together and I said, go away and think about this. And really their suggestion was that the competition should be based on the 3-day riding event, the badminton horse trials. And so we decided to do that, and we put the first draft rules on some roneoed paper, and in 1969 the Swiss offered to run the first international competition under these rules. And that took off from there. The very first thing is the presentation. The judges look at the whole turnout, the carriage and the horses and the grooms, to see that they're clean and well groomed, and that the harness and the carriage are technically correct in every way. And then immediately after that, there's what's known as the dressage competition, which is basically a series of compulsory figures which you have to execute within an arena. The main competition is on the second day, which is a cross-country competition in 5 sections. The last section has 8 what we call in English hazards, which are so designed that there are a number of different ways you can go through them. And each competitor is timed into the penalty zone and out of the penalty zone, having completed the compulsory gates, as it were, within each obstacle. On the final day, there's the equivalent of the show jumping, but of course it isn't really very practical to get 4 horses in a carriage to jump anything, so that we have them going between sets of plastic cones, which are set at about a foot wider than the track width of the carriage. And you have to negotiate them in exactly the same way as a show jumping course. I'd given up polo just at about the time in which these rules were being written, and I thought I might as well try something else. And as we had ponies in the horses rather, in the mews here, I thought I'd see how they went. I didn't know anything about it. The horses certainly didn't know anything about it. And fortunately, very few other competitors knew much about it. And so I got in really on the ground floor, which was, and grew up with the sport. I think it'd be very much more difficult for people to take it up now, because the standard has improved almost every year.
The skill in driving 4 horses has been recognized for centuries. But it wasn't until the turn of the century in Paris that four-in-hand driving began to be taught as an art rather than a trade. Today's competition drivers are keeping old traditions alive.
We have a saying in Cumberland that men over 6 feet and horses over 16 hands are no good for work. I always used to quote this. Now 2 of my horses are 17 hands, so I'm going against my preachings, but you need the power on the wheel. If you're going to drive tight obstacles, you've got to have power. And the 2-wheelers have got to be strong, good collared horses. Oh, stand, stand. What happens, you see, if your leader's going to draft, he just pulls the pole over, you can't steer. So you've got to get your leaders, as you come to an as, you've got to pull your leader range back a foot or so, get your leaders completely out of draft, and then drive your wheelers. Up. It's very easy to make a horse do things if you can touch him. You know, if you can give all of these circus people or horses do tricks, if you can touch your horse, give him a cue, he'll respond quite easily. But to make a horse work on the voice alone is difficult. And this is why, when it comes to driving, especially the further away you move from the horse, the more difficult it is to control him on the voice. Get. It's very important to know your horses and for your horses to know you and know your voice. I mean, so you can carry on a conversation or a carriage and the horse won't take any notice then, but he knows when you speak to him. The commands I give my horses are really old Cumberland horse sayings, what they used to give to the plough horses. You know, you'd say, right, come round, come over, get over. Come is to the right and get is to the left. Come. Come. Get. Hurry. Get. Steady, they're just a bar, steady. Used to that rattle up, steady. You want words with different tones, you see. If you use 2 words that were similar, the horse would get mixed up. Allez. I use the French word aller, to go, which is straight ahead. Get. Back. You come to back a team, you don't really pull the reins, you want to just back them on the voice. Back. Oh, get over. Back. But if you pull them, one will come back a bit quicker than the other than the twist because your pole comes over that inch too much. So if you get them both just coming back quietly on the word back. You know. Back, whoa. Get a bed. This is a nice big horse. It's called goulash. And of course, as you know, goulash is an Hungarian stew. And he was a lazy horse, actually, till I called him goulash. No, he shout goulash and immediately he comes alive. Well, I think his fighting is going into the goulash. That's what it is. Here, pay attention. Give me Yankee. Wave it. No, pick it up. Give it to me. Ta. Thank you. Attaboy. When you're working young horses, you go out every day and you can see the horse slowly improving. And it makes training interesting. Come! I like training young horses, and this is why I change teams regular. I don't think it's a good thing as regards winning competitions, but it certainly makes training more fun. Training doesn't become dull if you're schooling young horses. Come! I don't like putting a complete green team together, so you probably keep 1 key horse, or even 2 horses to train 2 young ones. And do that next year. I'll probably have 2 young ones and 2 old ones next year, then the year after have for completely. You get very attached to your horses. It's a very sad thing when you have to sell one or part with one. Come here. Have I to sell you? No. No. Say no. But no. That's it. Everybody who competes likes to win, but to me, if I had to drive the same team year in and year out and win everything, I'd soon lose interest. I'd rather stay at home and drive young horses.
The Hungarians, with their long driving tradition, have always shown exceptional skill in this sport. The Bugac stud, southeast of Budapest, has specialized for 20 years in breeding horses for team driving, and some of the best young drivers have been trained here, including Laszlo Juhász, a former world champion.
Since I became a world champion, the pressure is greater. I have to work harder and travel more. Now everyone wants to beat me. I'm totally in charge of the horse's routine. But we don't have such a wide choice as Westerners, with different kinds of feed, vitamins and so on. It's no use saying, give them lucerne hay, if we only have meadow hay. I do enjoy the sport, but I worry a lot as well. Maybe I do it because I love horses. It becomes a passion. In the West, a millionaire gentleman can suddenly decide to put a team together and go to competitions, no matter what the cost. My horses belong to the cooperative farm. I'll never have enough money to compete with my own four in hand. I'm not a factory owner. The cooperative buys the carriages, the horses, everything. They pay me and they own my house. We do win money abroad, but that goes to the sports organization, which arranges our travel and takes care of the foreign currency. The prize money goes to them. We just get our daily expenses, and that's more than enough. The Hungarian style of driving is quite different from the Western. The English put collars on their horses. The Hungarians use a breast harness. Traditionally, the English drive with all four reins in one hand, a four in hand. We Hungarians buckle the left pair and the right pair together and hold two reins in each hand. In Hungary, the carriage horse type is usually the Lipizzaner, but I don't like them much. I prefer the quick half-bred horses. They are part Hungarian trotter, part thoroughbred. Tourists bring in half our income. They come to see our horses and our Hungarian grey cattle. In the season, we give 2 or 3 displays a day, and last year we had 60,000 visitors.
Szegény megint
Anyone who thinks it's easy to get 4 horses to work together should have a go themselves. It's real work. Strength is important, of course, but you need more than that. To get your horses to go the way you want, you need brains, quick hands and good reflexes. In competition, we Hungarians don't do so well in the presentation and dressage. We lose penalty points compared to the Westerners. So we have to try and catch up in the marathon and the obstacle driving. People criticize us for being too tough on our horses, but today, if you want to win, you really have to take risks. You need courage and some Hungarian flair. This year I'm driving a completely new team, so I'm not likely to be a world champion again, but I hope I'll be among the medals.
In the United States, interest in the sport is growing rapidly after a late start. Enthusiasm and attention to detail make up for a lack of competitive experience. Among the top drivers is one of the few women competing at international level.
In Europe anyway, most of the team drivers are men, and most of the men have the money in Europe, and it is a fairly expensive sport. I also quite honestly feel that most men don't like the having their wives be the main competitor in the family. I saw Cynthia Hayden from England driving up in Toronto at the Royal Winter Fair, and I was so excited by the splendor and the brass and the polish and the patent leather and the glamour of it all that I immediately decided I had to start driving a team.
Thank you.
I liked the idea of team driving, and it was fun, and it gives you a high. And it does take a certain amount of skill, but it doesn't require the same athletic ability that riding does, especially high-level riding. And I think you can achieve a fair amount of success starting when you're grown up. I use a mixed pack of horses. I don't know anybody else who's driving 3 breeds of horses in their team, and I suppose it's not the thing to do. I have to have horses that have the right dispositions for me, and that means that they have to be quite tractable, not pull, and they have to wait for me when I'm in trouble. And that's perhaps one of the differences between me and some of the men drivers. They care more about the looks of the horses and the fact that they match than they do about the disposition. I believe this sport requires less ability from the horse, but more endurance and more teamwork between the animals, and certainly a very great degree of teamwork between the horses and the driver. That is the challenge of the sport, the achievement of getting 4 horses, sound, fit, conditioned, and trained and responsive to do the same job at the same time. The other countries are very strong. The Hungarians and the Dutch are particularly strong at the moment. But we hope this year that the Americans will have a very good showing. We have Bill Long, who's a star and has the ability to win a medal individually, I think. and can certainly put out a very good marathon.
To me, this is a real challenge. I work very hard at it, and I try very hard to do well at it. And my dressage still needs a lot more, but we're working at that. And I think someday that, as far as the United States goes, that we're going to have some of the best drivers in the world there.
Bill Long manages a farm in New Jersey, owned by top businessman Finn Casperson, and drives his team of Holstein horses. He's the most successful team driver in the States, and his aggressive style in the marathon took him to 7th place in the 1984 World Championships.
Okay, Billy, if you want to take the mirror out, Karina, you want to take Meister? My horse used to be so stiff and they wouldn't bend, and then with the single driving they really started to work and enjoy it. In our last event, it was the first dressage test that I have ever won, and I know it's because of the single driving.
Roscoe, come. Come. Roscoe, come. Come. Good boy. Good.
I have one lead horse that doesn't like the water at all. So I'm trying to get him over that. You know, wherever I can find a piece of water to put him in, I'll put him in it.
Come. Come.
He knows you're behind him, and he knows that you can reach him with that whip if he's not doing what you want him to. And then he responds when you get back in the team. You say his name, and he says, oh, he hasn't figured out yet that I can't get to him.
Ooh, it's too mucky. Oh. Oh, good boy. Oh.
I don't know how to explain it, but the horses really do respond a lot better after driving pairs and singles. Then you put them in the 4. I train hazards usually once a week. I have hazards on the farm that have 14 or 15 openings. They have to go in the opening. I want them to go in.
Good boy, come. Come.
I try to really settle them because they know if something's going to happen, maybe into it or halfway through it. It's a very dangerous sport, but if you let that bother you, may as well quit. A lot of times in the water, the horses have a tendency, they go in and they jump, like jump forward, like hopping in the water, and that's what happens. They usually get a trace in between their legs, or the wheelers jump over their lead bars, and that's when you're in big trouble. You almost have to stop most of the time to get them off. It's dangerous if you make it dangerous. If you get too gung-ho and a little bit too crazy with the horses sometimes, then you've made it yourself. You've done it yourself. It usually happens in a hazard if you come in a little too fast and you don't catch quite the right angle you want to be at. All it has to do is hit that post hard enough, and there's no way you can stay on. You go. I've been nervous. There's been some hazards where I've thought twice about it. But when you're with the horses, I feel really relaxed and at ease with them, because I know my horses. But now if it was another team and they asked me to get up and drive a team that I didn't know, then it would make me nervous. There are horses that have a tendency to take off with you once in a while if something spooks them bad enough. When you start canning your horses, like in these hazards, when we let them go, you're hoping that they respond to you and want to come back and not just keep on going. It's a very hard thing to get 4 horses stopped if they don't want to stop. My father had a saying, like he always told me, he says, I don't care what you do, Bill, but never let go of those horses. You can ride on that carriage as fast as they can run. There's some cases where there's 4 horses are going with it and they're coming to a rock wall and they're going to go through it or over it or through the trees. Then it's time probably to bail out. You got to have that win attitude, or else you just paddle along out there and coming in out of 25 teams, coming 25th. Because you won't be a winner unless you have that attitude, I think.
Come on! Good boy. Come. That's my baby.
I never had a team this fast, and I think that'll pay off. The boss is sure excited about it. We took 7th place the last World Championships, and we'd like to better that anyway if we could. But I feel anybody who winds up in the top 10 in the World Championships, you've done something.